Did you know that we almost got a JJ Abrams Superman movie? Did you know that Robert Downey Jr. almost played Lex Luthor instead of Iron Man? What about the secret Justice League movie that you never heard about that actually influenced the Snyder Cut? Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and today we are going to break down Superman's long movie history, and we're going to tell you about all of the insane Superman movies that we never got. And we're going to explain this terrifying curse that explains why there hasn't been a Superman sequel in 4 decades. And it's all because of one villain that apparently no one can ever use. First, let's briefly talk about the live-action movies that came first and that worked, and that laid the groundwork for all of these aborted projects that we never got to see. Superman's first live-action appearance was a 15-part serial that debuted in 1948, and then he found success on the small screen in the 1950s.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird!
It's a plane!
It's Superman!
But then, in 1978, Richard Donner's Superman made audiences believe that a man could fly.
Excuse me.
That's a bad outfit.
And then, Superman 2 exceeded all expectations, becoming one of the greatest superhero films ever made. These two films were cinematic events that defined Superman for nearly 50 years, proving that those silly comic books could be adapted into timeless and profitable films. However, the sequels and the Supergirl spin-off were so terrible that they actually destroyed the Christopher Reeve Superman franchise. Now, Batman '89 kept the ball rolling until pretty much the same thing happened. The Batman sequels got way too silly and tanked that franchise.
7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
But first, let's rewind the clock just a bit to the late 1980s, just before Superman 4, because there were plans for Superman 5. And this is the first canceled Superman movie that we want to talk about in this video. The 5th movie was going to be an attempt to bring the franchise back to its former glory. The villain would have been Brainiac, the terrifying alien android who collects knowledge by shrinking cities, putting them in a bottle, and then destroying their original worlds. In this canceled movie, Brainiac was going to defeat Superman and teleport him into the shrunken city of Kandor. That's the Kryptonian city that he collected a long time ago. So Superman would have reunited with other Kryptonians who survived their planet's destruction. Superman then escapes and defeats Brainiac, and based on the ideas of the script, this movie actually sounds really solid. So what happened? Well, at the time, the Superman property was owned by Cannon Films, but after Superman 4 and a bunch of other failures, Cannon went bankrupt and the plans for the sequel were lost, putting a tragic end to the Christopher Reeve era.
It's over. We are screwed.
A few years later, WB acquired the rights to Superman, but there was a catch. Somebody didn't pay attention, and somehow the rights were acquired by a movie producer named John Peters. You know, the farmer. Now, if you don't know who this guy is, here's a quick explanation. Peters famously started off in Hollywood as Barbra Streisand's hairdresser, and then somehow he became a producer. But he was kind of problematic and described himself as a...
Being a street fighter my whole life, that you can gauge the toughness of your opponent by the look in their eyes. I've been in 500 fights.
So more on this guy in a moment. But eventually, WB got the rights back, but it could only happen if Peters was involved in every Superman movie they made. Basically, Peters was like Sony holding Spider-Man hostage while letting the MCU borrow him. Now, by 1995, the WB were planning a reboot called Superman Reborn, and this was the start of a chain of events that led to one of the craziest productions of all time. Peters wanted to adapt the Death of Superman storyline from the comics when the Man of Steel was killed by a monster named Doomsday.
Can it be true? Superman will die November 18th at the hands of a villain named Doomsday?
This comic was released in 1992, and it was a massive event. The hype was insane. DC sold so many copies that it changed the industry, and for years, every comic book tried to bill itself with the same kind of event status. So, of course, WB wanted to capitalize on all this hype with their new Superman reboot. The movie was going to be about Superman fighting Doomsday, but after Doomsday kills Superman, he somehow transfers his life force to Lois and makes her pregnant, somehow. And their child grows up really fast and becomes the new Superman who saves the world.
That is one big pile of shit.
So this script was eventually thrown out, but then in 1996, Kevin Smith was hired to fix the script. And after some rewrites, Brainiac became the new villain, with Doomsday still being in the movie. And this is how Superman Reborn became Superman Lives. Now, the story of Superman Lives is insane. It's actually so crazy that we dedicated a whole video just for what happened with this movie. And that's the reason why I'm not going to talk too much about the behind the scenes of that film, because, we want to focus on these other crazy productions that you might have heard about and all these other canceled Superman movies from over the years. I also want to plug that for this video, we did a lot of research by watching the late, great John Schnepp's excellent documentary, The Death of Superman Lives. What happened? You can actually watch that documentary right here on YouTube. We have linked it below. It goes into so much detail on the project and includes some really cool interviews with a lot of the creatives involved, along with some fascinating concept art. But there are some things that I think you need to know. Tim Burton was supposed to direct. Nicolas Cage was going to play Superman. And of course, Doomsday kills Superman. And for some reason, Peters insisted that Superman fight a giant alien spider.
Did he bring up the spider? I said he did. He brought up the spider. He tell you guys about the spider like every day with the fucking spider.
Anyways, the important thing to remember is that Superman Lives was sort of the shape of things to come. Every problem they encountered with this movie just kept getting repeated for the next 20 years. Endless rewrites, delays, people getting fired and replaced, and a massive budget that led to a lack of commitment from the studio.
You. Hit that director in the face. Really fucking hard.
After Batman and Robin killed the Batman franchise in 1997, WB still wanted to make new Superman and Batman movies, especially since by the early 2000s, Marvel really started having success with Spider-Man, X-Men, and Blade. After Superman Lives, WB shifted their focus to another successful story from the comics, The Dark Knight Returns. Frank Miller's graphic novel was a major influence on Batman '89, but WB wanted to capitalize on this story, especially since that's the one where Batman fights Superman.
We're gonna make a lot of money together.
So, in 2001, WB started early work on a Batman vs. Superman movie. Now, the movie was going to reboot both heroes with a dark and mature tone. Now, I should clarify that with every plot breakdown in this video, we are basing our information on different scripts and drafts, plus interviews and released concept art. We're going to try to condense all of that into a cohesive breakdown of the plot. In 2002, Akiva Goldsman delivered the script for Batman vs. Superman, which was titled Asylum. The story is that Batman had retired 5 years ago. Robin, Alfred Pennyworth, and Commissioner Gordon are all dead. Superman and Lois are divorced, and everything is dark and sad.
So dark! You sure you're not from the DC universe?
But then, Bruce falls in love with a woman called Elizabeth. They get married, but then the Joker kills her. So Batman returns with a vengeance, obsessed with killing the Joker.
I have one rule.
Just as Batman is about to end the Joker, Superman stops him. Now, in this universe, Batman and Superman know each other and they are friends. But in his rage, Batman attacks Superman and they fight. And Batman has a special Superman ass-kicking suit like the one in Dark Knight Returns. Batman wins the fight, and then he's finally about to kill the Joker, but this is where the Joker reveals that his mom's name is Martha. No, the twist is that Lex Luthor was behind everything.
I am the villain of the story.
Elizabeth is actually a clone, and Lex wanted to make Batman go crazy so that he would kill Superman. So Batman lets Joker live, and then Batman and Superman team up against Lex, and Lex uses a mech suit like in the comics. But the world's finest win and go back to being good friends.
Always have to be the hero, don't you? Right back at you.
WB hired Wolfgang Peterson to direct, and they wanted to start filming in 2003 with the movie releasing in 2004. But the weird thing about casting is that Batman and Superman are clearly older, but WB wanted younger actors. Josh Hartnett was the top choice for Superman, while Jude Law, Colin Farrell, and Johnny Depp were all considered for Batman. And get this, Christian Bale was another top choice. So what happened? Well, unlike Superman Lives, this project never really moved forward beyond some initial plans.
It was a time where you would sort of be able to get these stories together in script form, but they couldn't quite land in the world.
The most we ever got was an Easter egg for the movie in I Am Legend, which was also written by Akiva Goldsman. Now, while developing the Wolfgang Peterson movie, WB also worked on separate reboots for each character. Now, WB liked those separate reboots better, so they dropped Batman vs. Superman to focus on the standalone films. For Batman, WB really wanted to adapt Batman Year One. This eventually became Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. And for Superman, WB went with a script written by JJ Abrams.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Now, in 2002, JJ was hired to write a draft for Superman Man of Steel, but everyone knows this movie by its working title, Superman Flyby. However, JJ was not hired to direct. Keep in mind that this was JJ Abrams before Star Wars, before Star Trek, even before Lost. he was not yet a big name in the industry. So WB hired Mick G to direct after he had success with Charlie's Angels. JJ wanted to subvert the Superman mythos, just like he did with the Star Trek reboot.
So what was the story about?
Well, there's a civil war on Krypton, and Jor-El is the king, but he's defeated by his evil brother, Kata-Zor. He's basically Zod, just with a different name.
I will find him!
Similar to Man of Steel, Jor-El sends baby Kal-El to Earth right before he fights Kata-Zor. But Jor-El doesn't die, and the destruction of Krypton never happens.
Just say right now?
Yeah, the planet survives with Kata-Zor becoming the new ruler. Another major change is that Superman is actually sent to Earth because of a Chosen One prophecy.
Woo! Nothing's gonna stop me now!
Wait, there was a prophecy.
Oh, now there's a prophecy.
Remember, this was the era of the Chosen One trope.
You are the Chosen One!
He is the one.
I will take the ring to Mordor.
But I am the chosen one.
So what's the prophecy?
Well, Superman's destiny is to free Krypton from his evil uncle and bring balance to the Force or something.
That's not how the Force works.
But in the most baffling JJ change, Lex Luthor is not an evil mastermind billionaire, but instead he is a special agent who is obsessed with aliens.
Is this why we came out here, Mulder? To look for UFOs?
Lex discovers an alien ship and his DNA is mixed with Kryptonian blood, so he becomes a super genius. And he sends a signal to Krypton revealing Superman's location to Kata-Zor.
Oh, that's just like in Man of Steel.
Yes, there are actually many concepts and even story beats from this movie that were repurposed in the next Superman reboots. In fact, that awesome airplane sequence from Superman Returns was straight out of JJ's script. JJ's Clark is still a good guy, but he's antisocial, he's a bit more violent, and he suffers from panic attacks after saving people. And Jonathan Kent dies from a heart attack because, and this is true, he gets a little too excited after his son becomes Superman. I'm not even joking about that. So Kata-Zor sends his son Ty-Zor to kill Kal-El. Ty-Zor arrives with his henchmen, who apparently are meant to be like space ninjas. And also famously, John Peters forced Tim Burton to add this ninja guy to Batman '89.
You know, there was a push to have like Superman having a lot of like kung fu fights, and it's like, well, he's not going to get into a kung fu fight with a bunch of ninjas. And
So I've been in 500 fights.
And when Superman fights with his evil cousin, Ty-Zor can do Kryptonian kung fu. This stuff was also probably influenced by the Matrix sequels, because the third movie proved that not only will you believe a man can fly, but also that he can do kung fu from space.
In space!
Anyways, Ty-Zor kills Superman.
So they're still trying to do that Death to Superman thing?
Yes, and when that happens, Jor-El takes his own life on Krypton, and then he becomes a Force ghost. And his spirit meets Superman in the Kryptonian ancestral plane, and he tells him about the prophecy. And then Jor-El transfers his life essence to his son.
So somehow, Superman returns.
Exactly. So he defeats his evil cousin by killing him. But it's not a neck break. Ty-Zor dies like the Green Goblin, impaled by his own weapon.
Oh.
There's also this bomb that can blow up the planet, and Superman saves the world. Now the movie ends with Superman getting into a ship that takes him back to Krypton to face his evil uncle. But there is an even crazier version of the movie, which we're going to explain a little bit later.
So what happened?
Well, WB liked the script and they moved forward with the production. They even designed the suit, and I think they probably started designing some of the toys, which is probably the reason they kept Krypton around to begin with.
Merchandising, merchandising! Where the real money from the movie is made.
In the early stages, WB hired Mick G to direct, but eventually he dropped out to focus on the Charlie's Angels sequel. So in 2002, Brett Ratner, allegedly not a very good guy, was hired as the new director. Now Ratner had just come off big success with the Rush Hour movie, and he was so confident in this script that he was already planning an entire trilogy. Now, there were many actors who were approached to play Superman. We can't even cover all the names. But get this, both Henry Cavill and Brandon Routh auditioned, and they even wore the suit made for this movie. Also, Amy Adams was considered to play Lois 10 whole years before she and Cavill were Lois and Clark in Man of Steel. And we almost got Ralph Fiennes as Lex Luthor and Anthony Hopkins as Jor-El. However, Ratner wanted a big-name actor to carry this Superman trilogy. But no actor wanted to commit to a trilogy that might hurt their career.
Well, why not? I mean, it's Superman.
Well, at the time, Superman's reputation wasn't that hot, and many actors did not see that much benefit in playing a superhero who fell from grace. And there was also that Superman curse.
Now, what curse is that now?
Well, there was some belief that something bad always happens to people who work on a Superman movie, if you believe in those kind of things. But there is a different, very real curse that we're going to talk about soon.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby! Don't you put that on us!
More importantly, none of these actors wanted to sign a 3-movie deal. Now, this was before the days of the MCU when actors signed on for like 50 movies.
Disney brought him back. They're gonna make him do this till he's 90.
Now, despite no actor cast as Superman, WB set the release date for summer 2004.
Because at Continental, we don't make films, we make movies. Movies that people want to pay to see.
Yes.
However, the movie got stuck in development hell, with rewrites and costs ballooning to more than $200 million. In early 2003, Ratner dropped out after many creative clashes with John Peters. Then Mick G came back, but by then JJ was replaced by Josh Schwartz, who rewrote the script with the most bizarre change. In his version, Lex Luthor was going to be revealed as a Kryptonian.
What the
And apparently there's a prophecy about him being the evil chosen one, and maybe also he's Kal-El's brother. But the amazing thing here is that the actor who almost played Lex was Robert Downey Jr. Just imagine a world where this movie was made and RDJ was too busy as Lex and he never would have become Iron Man.
And then how could he play Dr. Doom?
I know, right? Now by that point, Flyby was considered dead.
So what happened?
Between creative differences and a budget that spiraled out of control, delays, all of this killed the project. Also, Mick G suffered from a serious fear of flying, so he had to step down because WB wanted to film in Australia.
Statistically speaking, it's still the safest way to travel.
But then, in 2003, WB got a pitch for a new Superman movie from Bryan Singer. Now, Singer is also a very bad guy, allegedly, but at the time, he had just successfully brought the X-Men to the big screen. Singer had a clear vision for what he wanted to do, so Warner Brothers gave him everything he wanted. After 11 years and a graveyard full of failed reboots, WB finally made a Superman film.
We did it! We did it! We did it! We did it! No!
Now, since you can just go watch the movie, no recap of the plot is needed. But all I will say is that Superman Returns is highly underrated. And, like we said before, this movie has some awesome Superman moments, like the plane crash sequence. Unfortunately, the reaction to the movie was not super positive. Superman Returns is Singer's homage to Christopher Reeve's Superman franchise, but it's also a direct sequel to the director's cut of Superman 2, while ignoring the terrible sequels Superman 3 and 4, which resulted in very confusing continuity.
Fearless reporter Lois Lane is a mommy.
Especially since Batman Begins was a clean slate reboot, and many people assumed that this movie, which starred younger actors, would do the same thing. The biggest criticism was the movie's long runtime, slow pacing, and lack of big action scenes. And more importantly, it wasn't the big financial success that Warner Brothers was looking for.
So it's a bomb?
Well, let's break it down. Superman Returns' budget was $223 million. But Warner Brothers was already operating at a loss with all those failed movies that came before. So that brought the budget to around $260 million and another $100 for the massive marketing campaign. And the movie only made $390 million. And get this, Singer had just left X-Men 3 to make Superman. And while The Last Stand is clearly a worse movie, it made more money than Superman, and that movie was made by Superman reject Brett Ratner. So all of this killed any plans for the Superman Returns sequel.
Oh, there's going to be a sequel?
Yes, there were plans for another. So the sequel was going to be titled The Man of Steel, and they never really let that title die. And Man of Steel even got a tentative summer 2009 release date. Singer compared the sequel to The Wrath of Khan. He planned to introduce other Kryptonians, depicting them as a space-traveling civilization, and he wanted to explore how the other Kryptonians react to their powers. Would they be just like Zod, or would they try to be good guys like Superman?
I just read all about you. Astronauts from Krypton who were lost in space for decades.
And the main villain was going to be Brainiac. And if you remember, Brainiac was also going to be the villain in those previous canceled Superman movies from the 1990s.
Oh yeah, I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Yep, you guessed it. Brainiac is the cursed Superman villain.
It's a curse. It's a curse. Beware of the curse!
Every time WB wanted to use him in a Superman sequel, that project failed. In fact, even the supercomputer in Superman 3 was originally going to be Brainiac until they added Richard Pryor to the movie and made him the guy that constructs the computer. In the movie, Brainiac is revealed to be a Kryptonian AI who uses the bodies of Kryptonian clones. He destroyed Krypton, and now he travels the universe by assimilating worlds by turning them into data. He is attracted to Earth because of New Krypton. That's the Kryptonian island that Lex creates in the previous movie that Superman threw into space. When Brainiac arrives on Earth, he actually tries to make the world a better place and confronts Superman for not doing more to help the human race.
You want to protect the world, but you don't want it to change.
So he takes over Jason's body. That's Superman's son from the last movie, and he was going to be a teenager in this film. So Superman fights his own son, and in the end, he is forced to kill his own son to save the planet.
So what happened?
WB and Singer started clashing over many things. After Superman Returns underperformed, the studio didn't want to commit to a sequel since the budget needed to be much bigger. So the sequel was canceled.
No sequel for you.
So with another Superman movie dead and WB being WB, they decided that it's time to go bigger and make a Justice League movie. Well, at least try to make one. In early 2007, WB started work on Justice League Mortal. George Miller, the genius behind the Mad Max films, was brought on to direct. Now, originally, WB planned to use Christian Bale as Batman and Brandon Routh as Superman. However, both Bale and Nolan were against this because The Dark Knight existed in this grounded, realistic world that simply did not mix with the fantastical world of Superman.
Sound familiar?
And after nixing the Superman Returns sequel, WB decided to just get new actors and reboot Superman again.
So what's the story about?
Well, the movie adapted two main stories from the comics, JLA Tower of Babel and the OMAC Project. The main villains were Maxwell Lord and Talia al Ghul.
Life is good, but it can be better.
They hijack Batman's super secret AI satellite called Brother Eye, and it contains contingency plans to kill the Justice League.
But why would Batman want to create something like that?
Because he's Batman and he trusts nobody. So Lord then uses his fast food restaurant to infect people with the OMAC virus.
There's some funky chicken in the TDK slammer, ain't there?
It's these nanobots that turn people into a new race of mind-controlled superhumans. Lord can also telepathically control others, and he forces Superman to fight Wonder Woman. Now, eventually, the Justice League join forces to stop Superman, but he's just too powerful.
Alright, so this is where they got the idea for evil Superman.
Yes, and a little later, I'm going to tell you about another canceled Justice League that you never heard of with a brainwashed Superman. And this is where Snyder got his ideas for the Snyder Cut. So, to free Superman from mind control, Batman has no choice, and he kills Lord, breaking his neck. But there's a plot twist. Lord uploads his mind to the OMAC soldiers, so now he's like Ultron. And then he infects the Flash with the virus that turns him into the ultimate OMAC. So Flash must run.
Barry, run!
To save the world from the virus. Barry sacrifices himself by vanishing into the Speed Force. In the end, there's a funeral for Barry, and Wally West becomes the new Flash. But then, Starro the Conqueror appears in space, and the Justice League heads out to stop him. So yeah, it was a lot, especially since this is meant to be the first movie for new rebooted heroes.
So what went wrong this time?
Well, honestly, Justice League Mortal suffered from a string of terrible luck and poor timing. In 2007, WB hired Michelle and Kieran Mulroney to write the script. And like we said, George Miller was hired to direct on a massive budget of $220 million. Now, while all of this was happening, though, The Dark Knight was already in production. Remember this for later. So the cast of Mortal consisted of young and very good-looking actors. Armie Hammer was cast as the new Batman. That didn't age well. Which was kind of strange because Hammer was in his early 20s, but the script depicts a much older Batman. For Superman, WB chose DJ Catrona. Adam Brody was cast as Barry Allen, and years later, both of these actors would appear in Shazam. Megan Gale was cast as Wonder Woman, Common was Jon Stewart, Santiago Cabrera as Aquaman, and Hugh Keays-Byrne, aka Immortan Joe himself, as the Martian Manhunter. And the plan was that most of these heroes would already know each other, but the team will be formed during the movie. And for the main villains, Teresa Palmer was cast as Talia al Ghul, and Maxwell Lord was going to be played by Jay Baruchel. But WB had to rush the script because it had to be finished before the writer's strike of 2007. So they started building sets, and they designed suits, as you can see here in this crappy low-resolution picture.
It's a tiny piece of paper.
They were really going to make this movie even if the script was a mess. But then, more bad luck. The movie was supposed to be shot entirely in Australia. That's where George Miller does his Mad Max magic. WB was also supposed to get a huge tax discount because most of the cast and crew were Australian. But for bureaucratic reasons, the Australian government didn't give this discount to WB. So everything got delayed.
Why, Australia, why?
In the summer of 2008, they were finally about to start shooting. I mean, they were literally weeks away from cameras rolling, but then Mortal got the axe.
But why? What happened? The movie sounds so fun. What happened?
Well, The Dark Knight came out in July 2008, and it made WB $1 billion. And this movie was huge. It changed the genre and the entire perception of superhero movies.
You've changed things. Forever.
So WB figured, why risk this perfectly profitable Batman franchise by making a Justice League movie that they weren't that confident about anyways, which would have featured a completely different Batman.
What gives you the right? What's the difference between you and me?
I'm not wearing hockey pads.
Justice League Mortal became one of the biggest what-ifs of the superhero subgenre, because if not for all of those delays, maybe WB would have made the movie. So Miller's Justice League was canceled, and the studio decided to capitalize on Nolan's Batman, and they would attempt to replicate that success with more standalone movies. And this brings us to Man of Steel. Now, the idea was pitched to Christopher Nolan by David S. Goyer when they worked on The Dark Knight Rises. The plan was to replicate what worked for Batman, but do it with Superman. Now, Zack Snyder was hired in late 2010. And remember John Peters?
Oh yeah, did he try to put a giant spider in this movie too?
No, Nolan banned Peters from the set. And this is actually the last Superman movie that had Peters involved. Although Superman does fight a giant spider-looking machine, so I guess he finally got his wish. And finally, after 7 years, we got a new Superman movie. But the reaction was mixed at best. Sure, there are these Snyder fans who call Man of Steel a misunderstood masterpiece, and the rest of us just don't get the genius vision of Zack Snyder. Others felt like the movie had great action and visuals and a spectacular soundtrack. But some of the choices made in this movie were just too polarizing, especially Snyder's take on Superman, which was a major departure from the comics and the previous versions. Now, the movie did well though, making over $600 million. But of course, WB wanted more.
Like $1 billion.
Exactly. WB was disappointed with the movie, since it did not generate the same hype as the MCU or Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. And this is why, instead of Man of Steel 2, WB pivoted to Batman v Superman. But did you know that we almost got a Justice League movie as a follow-up to Man of Steel?
Wait, they wanted Justice League before BVS? I did not know that.
Well, sometime in 2012, WB hired Will Beall to write a script for a Justice League movie. And get this, Ben Affleck was a top name to direct the film.
I need to go closer. I want to get a closer look at this.
Darkseid was going to be the main villain. He brainwashes Superman to become his evil champion. So Batman assembles the Justice League. The team consisted of Wonder Woman, Barry Allen as the Flash, and Jon Stewart as the Green Lantern. Batman suits up in his Dark Knight Returns armor and fights this brainwashed Superman. But then, Superman is sent to the future where Darkseid rules the world. Batman and Wonder Woman have a son named Clark, and they lead the resistance against Darkseid. The Flash goes back in time to warn his younger self about Darkseid.
Wait, that's just the Snyder cut.
Yes, it is. Many ideas from this script were adapted to Snyderman's Batman vs. Superman and Justice League. So, in the new timeline, the heroes rescue Superman before he's brainwashed and they stop Darkseid.
So what happened?
Everything changed after the Avengers. The Avengers made $1.5 billion, becoming the third highest grossing film of all time, well, at least at the time. And so, Will Beall's Justice League was canceled. Instead, WB decided to launch their own cinematic universe, which would then culminate in their own Justice League movie. But after Man of Steel underdelivered, WB skipped all the work of actually building up a universe, and they just jumped straight into Batman v Superman.
Tell me, do you bleed? You will.
Now, there were plans to bring back Christian Bale for this movie, but eventually they just decided to reboot Batman with Ben Affleck. And of course, the internet was really happy about that.
It's like, Ben Affleck's gonna be Batman. The first one just goes,
And say what you will, but Affleck did give us a perfect Batman, even if he does kill a bunch of people. And WB then finally got to adapt The Death of Superman and The Dark Knight Rises all in one movie. The movie had a huge budget of $250 million.
And another $100 million for marketing.
That's exactly right. High five. Now, in theory, a Batman v Superman movie should have been one of the biggest hits of all time. This is the first time Batman and Superman share the big screen together. WB threw everything into this movie, even literally the frickin' kitchen sink. And they even threw in Wonder Woman and shoehorned Aquaman, Flash, and Cyborg, introducing them in a PowerPoint email.
You've got mail.
Dude, this thing claims I have mail. It's amazing what we can do with computers these days. Dude, now I'm reading it.
But even with all that, the movie fell short of $1 billion. And yes, Snyder fans, I know it made nearly $900 million. That is a shit ton of money.
It wasn't $1 billion. Mediocre.
Well, it's kind of true. I mean, WB hoped that the hype the movie would generate would ensure their new cinematic universe would be as successful as the MCU, if not more successful.
Sequel after sequel after sequel.
Because this was no friendly, colorful comedy crap. This was the real shit. This was the Snyder dark and mature version. But the movie fell short of WB's expectations, and the reaction from audiences wasn't great.
Save Martha! Why did you say that name?
Martha.
And maybe the movie was underappreciated because it came out during an era when the MCU dominated, and the audience just wanted everything to be like the Marvel movies, happy, lighthearted, fun. But the important thing is how WB reacted, because Batman v Superman changed everything for the DCEU, which should have been a building block that erects a giant skyscraper of DC content kind of collapsed because of a weak foundation. And this is how we ended up with the Justice League. And here's what happened. Batman v Superman came out on March 25th, 2016, while Justice League started filming in late April that same year. Now, the reason why these dates matter is that in that short amount of time, WB went into total panic mode. The script was reworked multiple times with too many people with very different visions.
You see, this is why I hate writing with a large group. Everybody has their own little opinions and it all gets homogenized and you lose the whole edge of it.
These rewrites, by the way, continued even while the movie was being filmed. And then Joss Whedon was brought in to make more changes to the script. So Snyder's very distinct style and vision was forcefully turned basically into the Avengers. Now, in May 2016, Zack Snyder was forced to step away from the project because of a family tragedy. And then Whedon took over reshoots, and this is how we got this.
Yes, ma'am.
Kal-El, no!
Oh, something is definitely bleeding.
Dostoevsky.
Now, we can blame Whedon, and I'm sure he probably deserves a lot of the blame. However, this movie was doomed from the start. It was made by an executive committee. I mean, this wasn't even a movie. It was a $300 million commercial for the DCEU. So Justice League bombed really hard in 2017. There was simply not enough hype for this movie. After a very public divorce between Snyder and WB, the visionary director really never got to return to his DC saga. But when Zack Snyder was working on Batman v Superman, he already laid out plans for 3 Justice League movies. Snyder's original plan was to create a 5-movie epic: Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and then 3 Justice League movies.
So what was Snyder's original plan?
Well, Justice League Part 1 was mostly going to be like the Snyder Cut. But then, in Part 2, Darkseid was going to be the main villain. He's after the anti-life equation, this cosmic thingy that will allow him to control every being in the universe. Lex forms his team of supervillains as teased in Part 1, and they work with Darkseid.
Shouldn't we have a league of our own?
Lois, who is pregnant, is killed by Darkseid, and then he takes over Superman's mind, turning him into evil Superman. So again, this is all pulled from that other Justice League script that we already talked about before. The movie ends on a cliffhanger after Darkseid takes over the world and transforms it into the new apocalypse. In Part 3, Batman leads the surviving heroes, including the Joker. So it's a lot like the ending that we saw in the Snyder Cut. But then, Superman kills them all and Flash goes back in time to warn Batman. Now this changes the timeline because Batman saves Lois before Darkseid kills her, but in the process, Batman is killed. Superman then unites the heroes, and this also includes the Green Lanterns, multiple Green Lanterns. And then we get a battle like an Endgame and the heroes defeat Darkseid. Also, Lex helps the heroes and sacrifices himself to save the world. And 20 years later, Superman and Lois' son, Bruce, becomes the new Batman. Plot twist, he's not actually Superman's son.
What?
Turns out that Batman and Lois had an affair while Superman was dead, and Bruce Jr. is actually Batman's son.
But I just want to know why.
Rafe, I'm pregnant.
Oh my God.
Now, the Snyder Cut eventually happened, but it was less about Snyder finishing his vision and more about boosting subscribers for HBO Max, or Max, or HBO. It's HBO Max, right?
Yeah, it's HBO Max now.
Okay, HBO Max. Now, they kept releasing various movies and sequels, with Aquaman making over $1 billion. But WB's reactionary decisions after Batman v Superman basically doomed the DCEU forever. So, we never got the Man of Steel sequel. However, before Man of Steel was even released, Snyder had already started working on ideas for a second movie.
Let me guess, the villain is gonna be Brainiac.
Yes, Brainiac was going to be the main villain. I told you guys, that villain is cursed. Every Superman sequel or reboot that was going to have Brainiac was eventually doomed.
We're doomed.
The sequel would also include Bizarro, Superman's clone who was created by Brainiac. However, Snyder's original pick was actually Metallo, you know, the cyborg with kryptonite for a heart, and Supergirl was also supposed to appear. But after Snyder left, the sequel got stuck in a loop of development hell. Cavill really wanted to come back, and he did the work to make it happen. WB wanted to make a new movie, and at different points, directors like Matthew Vaughn, JJ Abrams, and even Michael Bay were involved. In 2018, Christopher McQuarrie pitched a sequel after working with Henry Cavill on Mission Impossible Fallout. That's the one where Cavill reloads his fists, with his incredible mustache that ruined Justice League. For years, nothing was known about that potential project, but recently, in an interview with Josh Horowitz, McQuarrie revealed some details.
and it would have been epic. It would have been epic. In 5 minutes, the scale of the movie would have been absolutely extraordinary.
Based on the interview, Green Lantern was going to be in the movie, but it's unclear which version or what the actual story was. But it seems like WB never really had any plans to go forward with this movie. And that is a huge shame, because just imagine Tom Cruise as Hal Jordan. They could have wrapped him in shiny green tinfoil and sent him into space for the greatest stunt ever.
Yeah, is it true you're going to be in space next? We're working on that. I'm working on that, definitely.
Anyways, Cavill was supposed to have a cameo in 2019 Shazam, but the deal fell through, and this is why we get a headless Superman. But Cavill did finally come back in Black Adam in 2022 in a super awkward post-credits scene.
There's no one on this planet that can stop me. Black Adam. We should talk.
The Rock tried to use the chaos of Warner Brothers to basically push his way into taking over DC, and then building the universe around Black Adam. So Cavill then went on Instagram and announced he was back, and we were going to get a Black Adam versus Superman film.
I wanted to make it official that I am back as Superman.
But then, Black Adam kind of failed. The Rock did not change the hierarchy of power. In fact, Black Adam was the final nail in the DCEU coffin.
Poor Henry.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest sins of the DCEU mess. He was really good, but he never got a chance to just be Superman.
There is such a bright future ahead for the character, and I'm so excited to tell a story with an enormously joyful Superman.
And this finally brings us to the Superman reboot and how James Gunn took over the DC franchise. So, a little bit of backstory on how all of this happened. Gunn became a big deal thanks to the Guardians of the Galaxy films. He took a team of completely unknown heroes and created one of the best MCU movies ever, which then became an incredible and successful trilogy. But then in 2018, Disney fired Gunn over some really old, bad tweets. This allowed WB to snatch Gunn up to make DC movies for them. They gave him a blank check to make whatever movie he wanted, but they really wanted him to make a new Superman reboot. But instead, Gunn decided to do the Suicide Squad in 2021.
It wasn't quite like that. Okay. Please do Superman. They said Superman, 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 yep. And they said what we really need is Suicide Squad sequel.
And later, he got a spinoff with the show Peacemaker. But then in 2022, everything changed. Following the Warner Brothers Discovery merger, Gunn was made the new head of DC Films, working side by side with his long friend and producer, Peter Safran. And this is how the DCU was born. Not long after, Gunn announced that he would direct and write the Superman reboot.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Superman is the first movie in the DCU, being part of a slate of projects that is called Gods and Monsters. This chapter also includes Creature Commandos, Peacemaker, and the upcoming Supergirl movie, plus Clayface and Lanterns. And eventually, we will get The Brave and the Bold about Batman, but it will not have Robert Pattinson's Batman. So, like a lot of previous times, we have a really good and successful Batman that just can't make it into the new cinematic universe. So that is the insane history of the Superman franchise. Did we miss any canceled movies? Which one of these films do you think would have been the best? And big shout out to Pavel T, who wrote and edited this video. Let us know what you think down in the comments below, or you can at me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, or on our free to join Discord server. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.